Hello, everybody. My name is Michael Richards, and this is Programming Made Simple, how to check all the boxes and make programming easy. So, before you start programming, you need to understand the difference between strength and power and why they are important. So, strength, simply put, is the ability of a muscle or muscle group to exert force against an external resistance. There are three types of strength we typically focus on. The first type of strength is our maximal strength. This is simply the greatest amount of force that a muscle or a group of muscles can voluntarily produce. Relative strength is the maximal force an individual can exert relative to their body mass. And finally, endurance strength or strength endurance is the ability to sustain submaximal force production over time. Moving on to power, power is the ability to generate force quickly, and this is closely tied to rate of force development and velocity of movement. So how fast the weight is moving. I don't like saying fast because it's not a speed component, but we do look at the ability to move mass at a certain rate. So in order to understand how to create cycles within programming, we need to understand basically what is the primary focus. Are we looking at strength? Are we looking at power? Or are we looking at hypertrophy? Once we've identified the focus, we need to build to that focus. So if their focus is, I want to be more powerful, we need to get them to be able to express that power. So hypertrophy grows the muscle. Hypertrophy is how big the muscle gets. Strength is the force that muscle can produce. And then power is the rate at which that muscle can produce the force. So as you can see, all of these are codependent on each other. All qualities need to be trained. So a client or an athlete is not going to get stronger if you're not building the base of muscle first. If there's no muscle for the force to produce or for the force to be produced through without hypertrophy, then there's no force that will be produced, or it'll be a weaker force. Similarly, if there's not enough muscle for recruitment, then we are going to not be very powerful because there's not enough muscle to recruit in order to elicit that power. So hypertrophy is needed to grow the base of muscle with which we can use to produce our force, which we can then use in order to produce that force at a higher rate. So that's a very basic understanding of strength and power that we need to get out of the way before we get started on the programming ideas. So there are 10 fundamental movement patterns that I typically recognize. We have universal patterns of squat, hinge, push, pull, carry, and brace. And then we have specialized movement patterns of throw, crawl, sprint, and jump. Universal patterns are those that every single person, no matter what, should be able to master. Specialized patterns are typically patterns I would focus on more with athletes or populations that require these movements. However, the key component here is all of these movement patterns should be trained within your respective population. So there are two types of movement within the movement patterns themselves. Our first type of movement is unilateral movement. This is using one limb, either the arm or the leg, at a time, or placing the primary load on one side of the body. This requires more muscle and joint coordination under load, and it usually is lower intensities, but it yields greater stability gains. Additionally, we have bilateral, which is using both limbs of the arms or the legs at the same time in the same movement pattern. This bilateral allows for higher intensities due to the increased balance, stability, and distribution of weight. So, when we look at the squat, there are two ways to load the squat as a movement pattern. We have anteriorly loaded, which is looking at the muscles on the front side of the body. This typically includes our quads, our hip flexors, abdominals, etc. These movements typically include a front squat variation. So this could be goblet squats and then lunge variations as well. So movements that stress the quads, hip flexors, abdominals, etc. We have our posterior dominant movement, which are muscles on the back side of the body. So we're looking at hamstrings, glutes, calves, lower back, hips, etc. These movements typically include back squats, RDLs, glute bridges, deadlifts can be worked in here. That's a debate between squat or a hinge pattern with that, but it's mostly posterior dominant. And then good mornings exercises that are hingy as well. When we look at push movement patterns, we can break our push and our pull up into planes of movement. So we have a vertical plane of movement where we're occurring in the sagittal plane by pressing the weight overhead. These include overhead presses, push presses, etc. We have horizontal push patterns that occur in the transverse plane where we're pressing the weight away from the center line of the chest. So these include bench pressing, push-ups, etc. When we look at pull movement patterns, we have again our vertical pulls. So these are movements occurring on the sagittal plane, pulling the weight from overhead, including pull-ups, pull-downs, etc. And we have horizontal pull patterns, which are occurring in the transverse plane, where we are pulling the weight toward the center line of the chest or just towards ourselves. These include any kind of row variations. Then finally, we have carries. So carries, we have bilateral carries, which are just farmer's carries or overhead carries. We have unilateral carries, which include single arm variations, so farmer's carry or overhead single arm farmer's carries. And then we have hybrid, which are crossovers. So we have offset farmer's carry and offset overhead carries. If you're not familiar with offset carries, basically you take a heavy weight in one hand and half the weight in the other hand, and you just do your farmer's carry. If you are doing overhead, the lighter weight would be the one that goes up overhead. All right, so welcome to programming. This is the tier system, Coach Mike's version, coming from Joe Ken's the Coach's Strength Training Playbook. So what the tier system is, it's a full body training framework that organizes workouts into structured tiers or blocks, where different movement patterns rotate in priority. And this is important because instead of splitting programs by muscle groups like chest or leg day, each workout trains the whole body, but with shifting focus. So what this does is ensures a balanced development across the entire body. We can fit this anywhere from 2 to 4 sessions per week, and this is easily adjusted to a client's schedule. This helps avoid overuse or gaps by rotating what gets top priority, and it keeps training structured, progressive, and adaptable to any fitness goal, be that strength, fat loss, general fitness, etc. What's really great about this system is if you have a client that's training with you twice a week, let's say, and one day they're not able to make their training, you've at least capitalized on that one session by touching something in the entire body that now has yielded better strength gains or better gains overall. Whereas if you are doing a typical split programming, you run the risk of, let's say they're Monday, Wednesday with you, and they do chest on Monday and legs on Wednesday. And let's say Wednesday they can't come in. You're now only doing chest with them, and then it'll be another week and a half until you see legs again. So this way, it allows you to hit everything every day. So if clients have to miss sessions for whatever reason, then you're at least checking the box and making sure that you've hit everything at some point. So breaking down the tiers. Tier 1 is an effort-based block. So the primary exercise in Tier 1 is effort-based. So this is your primary focus of the session. This is typically your heaviest and most demanding lift, and it's typically going to be a bilateral compound movement. And the next couple slides are going to show what I mean by this. Tier 2 is a dynamic effort movement. So this is the secondary focus of the session. This is where a unilateral variation can be worked in pretty easily. There's less focus on weight and more focus on the dynamic element. So when this system was created by Joe Ken, the dynamic component of this was typically more West Side focused, so thinking chains, bands, stuff like that. For with lacking availability of those things, this is where the unilateral variation can be worked in very well. And then Tier 3 is our volume. So this is the tertiary focus of the session. This can be bilateral or unilateral, and we're mostly focusing on accumulating volume or getting a pump. So supersetting, the supersets of the primary exercises. This program I have found works best when paired with specific accessory movements. What I mean by that is we're pairing the paired exercise of the main movement primes you for the primary exercise of the next block. This also needs to balance between push, pull, and squat and hinge movements so we don't get too dominant on one or the other. Tier 3, so our volume block, the paired accessory should always be carries. That is what I found is the most effective for this program. All right, so putting it all together. Now, I'm going to use my cursor here. So my cursor's over here right now. Let's follow the cursor. So if we look at this, our tiered movements are bolded with our accessory superset italicized. So if we look at day 1 with our A block here, our first exercise is going to be a total body effort-based movement. All right, this can be something like a deadlift. We are going to pair that with a lower body primer because our next block is going to be a lower body dynamic exercise. So because we have a lower coming up, we are going to prime with a lower body accessory with our total effort. And then we're going to keep that going. So when our B block here, our lower body dynamic is our focus, and we're going to pair that with an upper body primer to get ready for the upper body volume exercise we have next, and then our carry is finishing it off. And then the way this works with the rotation is the next day, everything just moves up. So our day 2, we're just moving our lower up to effort. We're moving our upper up to dynamic. And then our total goes down to our volume since we just hit it with effort. Nice and simple. The next, the complementary exercise is priming you for the next block's main lift. And then we're finishing on our carry. Day 3, same thing. Our upper body now becomes our effort. Our total volume becomes our total dynamic. And then our lower effort drops down to lower volume with our carry to finish it off. And our accessories priming our next movement. And what's really nice about the tier method is our day 2 is able to be replicated to day 4 because we can load an anterior and a posterior squat pattern for our lower effort. So if we do day 2 is a front squat effort, we can do day 4 as a back squat effort, right? And we're taxing a squat pattern, but we're differentiating between a anterior dominant and a posterior dominant. So filled in a little bit of exercises here just as a sample. This is not a program I run. This is not something that I have. I just put this together to emphasize the example here. So our day 1, if you remember, was a total body effort. So we are looking at deadlift paired with a goblet squat because we have lunges coming up next. So goblet squat is an anterior loaded squat pattern, and our lunges are going to be anterior loaded unilateral patterns. So we have our deadlift as our total body effort-based exercise. We have our lunges as our dynamic lower body exercise. And then we have a dumbbell bench press as our upper body volume-based exercise. Following the rotation here, our lower body goes up to effort, our upper body goes up to dynamic, and then our total body goes down to volume. Our day 2, we have an anterior squat. This can be something like a front squat, a goblet squat, some kind of front-loaded squat pattern that your population is able to do. Then we have some kind of pull-up or lat pull-down or something to warm up our triceps and lats as a pull, but also as a primer for the antagonist of our dumbbell single arm incline bench press, where we are working our dynamic upper body movement. Dumbbell, single arm, incline variation. So we have a lot of, we have 3 different dynamic properties going on with this bench press variation. Pairing that with a total body primer, which is a med ball slam in this case. Going into sled pushes as our total body volume base with a single arm farmer's carry variation. So I skipped over this, but our farmer's carry, just bilateral farmer's carry, is day 1. We're shifting into a unilateral farmer's carry for day 2. When we look at day 3, we have our upper body effort based. This I just randomly selected overhead press. This could easily be a bench press. This could be any kind of upper body press or pull. So we can alternate day 3, where one week is a upper body push effort, and the next week could be an upper body pull effort where we sub in barbell rows or Pendlay rows or row variations for our upper body pull effort base. So feel free to rotate that. We're pairing that with a med ball rotational slam as our total body dynamic exercise comes up as a landmine single arm push press. So it's a total body single arm, some rotational power component in there as well, with a glute bridge to prepare to prime us for our RDL coming up in the volume block of our lower body volume. We're doing barbell RDL. We are doing this with a bilateral offset carry. So we did bilateral carry day 1, unilateral carry day 2, bilateral carry day 3, and then I think you'll see where this is going with day 4. But we are moving our lower body up to posterior squat. So if we did a front squat on day 2, we will now do a back squat on day 4, paired with a face pull or some kind of high pull variation to get ready to get our lats and our shoulders warmed up for a dumbbell single arm row variation. That could be a chest supported row, bent over single arm row, popping your knee up on a bench single arm row, whatever you want to do. Some kind of dynamic row variation to counter out the pushing that we've done. We're going to pair this with a upper body or total body, accessory primer with a med ball step plus chest pass. So stepping into the chest pass, priming for a hex bar deadlift, where we're looking at volume here, and volume is going to be subjective to the exercise you're doing. So if I'm doing sets of 12 bench press and 12 RDLs, I would never do a set of 12 deadlifts. It's just volume based on the exercise that you are completing for that block. And I'm going to get into volume and intensity selection in a minute. And then we're pairing that day 4 with our unilateral offset overhead carry. Again, the lighter weight would be the one overhead with our heavier weight. So again, offset is heavy weight with half the weight in the other hand. So our half the weight in the other hand would be offset overhead. Now, volume and intensity selection. Volume is the amount of work being performed. Think of volume as sets and reps. Intensity is the resistance being used. So how much weight they're lifting in that given set or rep or session overall. Typically, this is a percentage of maximum, but we can also use RPR, RPE, and RIR. So I have scales over here where we have our RPE scale based on RIR, reps in reserve. So the good way to think about this, and this is hard to use in undertrained or lack of training populations, typically what we look for here is how many more reps could you have done. If you hand somebody 20-pound dumbbell and you say, do a set of 10 bench press, and they get done with 10, you ask them how many more they could do. If they say, I could probably have done 2 more reps, we're looking at an 8 RIR or 8 RPE with 2 RIR. And then you'll gauge your weight selection based on that, right? Based on what you're trying to accomplish for that session. So RPE and RIR is a good system to use for people starting out. You just kind of ask them on a scale of 1 to 10, how hard was that? And then gauge that, or how many reps did you think you could do? Just using your coach's judgment, your best judgment with that. The next chart we have down here is your your rep selection based on your intent, right? So your yellow is your strongest benefit from that range, wherever range we're looking at, with green being the least benefit from that rep selection, and then our gradients in between, so where they kind of fall off at, right? So we talked about hypertrophy, we talked about strength, we talked about power. Muscular endurance is going to be your strength endurance that I talked about earlier. So when we are looking at hypertrophy, let's start with hypertrophy, building the muscle. We are going to see the most benefit from hypertrophy between 6 reps and 12 reps. Once we pass 12 reps into that 13 to 20 rep range, we're no longer in hypertrophy. We are in endurance now. So again, hypertrophy is the growth of the muscle. 6 to 12 rep range is ideal for hypertrophy. If we're looking for muscular endurance, we're looking for 13 to 20. So for most clients building hypertrophy, we are looking for 6 to 12 rep range. If we are looking for strength, we are looking for anywhere from 1 to 6, with some charts going out to 8 as well. Again, just because it's turning blue here doesn't mean we're losing benefit. I mean, it does mean we're losing benefit, but it doesn't mean we're not getting benefit, right? So there's some programs that are up to 8 reps for strength, and that's okay. Typically, the heavier the weight gets, the lighter or the fewer reps you're going to do. And then power-based movements, if you are doing Olympic lift variations, no more than 3 reps. Again, if you are doing Olympic lift variations, snatches, cleans, even the pull derivatives of those, no more than 3 reps, or you will start seeing technique breakdown and you will not have enough ATP synthesis for power production. Now, this chart, we're seeing anywhere from 1 to 5 or 6 reps. 5 is where we can get away with our med ball work, our med ball slams, rotational slams, etc. We're still producing power, and we're looking at that 5 rep range before we start losing ATP stores and we start breaking down a technique. So this is also where jumps can come in. Our power training, we can get about 5 jumps in before we start seeing that fall off of technique and power producing capability. So everything else is where the gradients start falling off. If you're doing sets of 16 to 20, you are not making strength benefits. That is not what we're looking at. Same with power. Same with hypertrophy. Even we're falling off of hypertrophy, and additionally with sets 2 to 6 to 5, we're not building the muscle. We're not building muscle there. We're producing force. This is strength gain territory. Hypertrophy is really only showing between that 6 to 12 rep range. So one way to regulate your volume and make sure you are hitting adequate volume and intensity based on what you're aiming for is Prilepin's chart. So Prilepin's chart is giving you volume guidelines basically to keep training effective and safe. It's more about using it as a framework to balance intensity, volume, and recovery for your general population, as well as athletes and powerlifting, weightlifting, etc. So what we're looking at with Prilepin's chart here is this is based on percent of 1 rep max. So if you do not have a 1 rep max, that is okay. We are going to look for basically just take your RPE, and if they're saying that's a 7 out of 10, call that 70% and go from there. It's not exact science, but it will get you most of the way there for a majority of the population. So when we look at Prilepin's chart, we're looking at percent of 1 rep max on our left column here, and this is the approximate number of repetitions per set. All right. So we don't want to go more than 1 to 3 reps in that 95 to 100% range. This third column is the optimal total reps per workout with ranges, right? So optimal is going to be 7 reps in that 95 to 100% range per workout. Now, this is muscle group specific, right? So if we're talking about, this is mostly talking about our, right now in that 9, I'm getting ahead of myself. So with a range of 4 to 10 reps per that group, right? And then the training effect here is max strength. And then as we go down, we're looking at different ranges, right? So 85 to 95% of 1 rep max from 6 to 3 reps, optimal being 10, is a strength benefit, right? We saw that with the chart I just presented. 75 to 85% of 1 rep max, we're looking at 6 to 10 reps per set, with a optimal reps per workout being 15. And this is where our hypertrophy and endurance start coming in with our reps ranging from 10 to 20. 65 to 75% of 1 rep max, we're looking at 10 to 20 reps per set, with an optimal total reps per workout being about 18 with a range of 12 to 24. And this is our explosive power, endurance, and some hypertrophy. And then as we get down into the lower percents, we get higher reps, higher optimal reps per workout with mostly endurance focus. So the way you can use this chart is looking at what your focus is on the far right. If we are looking at our effort-based A block for tier 1, that is where we're looking at our max strength and strength. So our first 2 rows there, our 95, basically our 85 to 100% of 1 rep max for anywhere from 7 to 10 reps per workout. So that is our tier 1. Then we start looking at our 65 to 85% of 1 rep max for anywhere from 18 to 15 optimal reps per workout. And that is where our tiers 2 and some of our tier 3 can fall in. But most of our tier 3 is going to be more in that 65 to 75% range and below. So our endurance-based ranges there. So all of this is how you start putting programming together. So what I recommend for everybody listening to this is for you to pull out a piece of paper or a blank spreadsheet or however you want to do this, and just create this template right here where it is day 1, day 2, day 3, day 4 across the top. And we have our A block, B block, C block. And we have our effort or our primary exercise, our accessory, primary accessory, and just start plugging in what you would do for workouts, right? So plugging in your main lifts and then your paired accessories based on the main lifts, making sure we're hitting all of the movement patterns I covered at the beginning. And then finally you go in and you put your sets and reps in and make sure that you're, or you could double check your volume against Prilepin's chart. But this has been, I've been Coach Mike. This has been my webinar, my educational seminar, whatever we want to call these things, my coaching development talk on how to make programs simple. Feel free to email any questions, comments, or discussions to strengthcoachthoughts@gmail.com. And if you also send me programs, I will review programs if requested. I will probably do them in video format here where I just share my screen and I talk through line by line what I see with your program. So feel free to send those to me at the email provided as well. And thank you for listening.